We're going to discuss today what happens when your country is invaded by an Islamic army in their mission to establish Islam across the entire world, to establish their caliphate and subjugate everyone under Islam. Our thanks to Armageddon News and to Sonia Azam for their support. We really do appreciate the opportunity. Your hosts, this is us. I am Lloyd de Jong, and we have Thaddeus Billman from Reasoned Answers Apologetics on YouTube. Links below. All of the references that we're using are also in the description below. Since its inception, Islam has subjugated, enslaved, and extorted the people it conquered in its religious quest to submit the entire world to Sharia. The caliphate is the original apartheid state. Islamic conquest of formerly Christian lands created a class of citizen called Dhimmis. The Dhimmi is an indentured prisoner of war. They are forced to provide money for the expansion of the Islamic state by paying Jizya, and Jizya means retribution. It is a punishment for not being part of the caliphate as a Muslim fighting to expand the caliphate. So we're going to study major Sharia and fiqh sources and the works of top Islamic scholars, and this is not a misspelling, I mean this, to learn about this heinous Islamic practice. And yes, that is scholiars. Okay, so let's have a look. So we have a little bit of Muhammad's wisdom, just so we can understand the kind of mind that we are dealing with here. So in Sunan Abi Dawud, in the Kitab al-Sitta, which is one of the 6 most important volumes of the Sharia, of the Hadiths, we see, I heard the Messenger of Allah saying, do not kill your children secretly, for the milk with which a child is suckled while his mother is pregnant overtakes the horseman and throws him from his horse. Now, if someone could please translate this for me, I would appreciate your comments. A Muslim 2 days ago told me that this relates to postpartum depression. After a woman has had a baby, the depression is so powerful it can feel as if you fell off a horse. Personally, I think it says more about do not kill your children secretly. It doesn't say don't kill your children. It says don't kill them secretly. I could be wrong, please. Yeah. This is Islam. This is the word of Muhammad, and the most perfect man to ever walk the earth.
Yeah, some amazing advice there. I mean, if Muhammad hadn't come along, then I'm sure we would all be killing our children. And this is just such incredible wisdom that no one could have come up with on their own.
It's incredible. Yeah, this is Islam. This is the side of Islam they don't want to talk about, and this is not an isolated event either. Okay, so now we're going to be using a book called Reliance of the Traveler. It is the most famous manual of Islamic sacred law, as they call it. It's the classic manual of Islamic sacred law. It is a summary of all 4 schools of jurisprudence. It is mainly a Shafi'i school manual, but it is a summary of all of the schools, and it is the most sound of all of the fatwa, the binding fatwa that is issued. And this is the most famous, most popular, most used, sold, and most highly authenticated and endorsed Sharia manual in the world. For instance, we can find information of this type. Puberty applies to a person after the first wet dream or upon becoming 15 in lunar years. Now that is section K 13.8. So if you're looking for specifics in rulings in Islam, you can find that here. So what is interesting is that Muslims are always telling us, well, no, puberty is around 7. Like when a girl turns 7, you can have sex with that girl and it's okay. Well, apparently it's 15 years old. Or, now interesting here, or when a girl has her first menstrual period, okay, well, so that means that she's reached puberty. It doesn't mean that she has reached adulthood, that she's ready for pregnancy, ready for a baby, but according to Islam, yes, it is. But notice, this says that she has reached puberty when she's 15, or when she has her first period, or if she falls pregnant. So if she falls pregnant at 7, she was mature, wasn't she? And how do you find out if she's mature? Well, you have sex with her when she's 7. So yeah, this is Islam. What are your thoughts on this, on the morality and the logic within this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's pretty clear that puberty isn't necessary for sex because, I mean, you can't get pregnant without having sex. So if it's an or, you know, it's like, Well, if she has a menstrual period, then she's an adult. If she turns 15, she's an adult. Or if she gets pregnant from the sex you were already having with her before she became an adult, then she's an adult.
Yeah. So, yeah. So this is just the kind of information we can find there. But let's continue. Now, I want to introduce what Islam's orthodox position is on Christianity and Judaism. Our focus obviously is your Christianity, but this is the orthodox position. This is the doctrinal position of Islam and Christianity and on who Muhammad is. So let's look at section W 4.0, the finality of the Prophet's message. This section has been translated to clarify possible confusions among Muslims as to Islam's place amongst world religions. Let's confirm. Previously revealed religions were valid in their own eras, but were abrogated by Islam. And they speak of that English-speaking Muslims are exposed to erroneous theories affirming these religions' validity. That would be Christianity and Judaism, but denying or not mentioning the abrogation of Christianity and Judaism, or that it is unbelief, kufr. Remember, you become an apostate, and what is the punishment for an apostate? Well, that is death. To hold that the remnant cults now bearing the names of formerly valid religions, such as Christianity or Judaism, are acceptable to Allah after he sent Muhammad. So they believe that for a Muslim to state, to you be your religion, to me be my religion, there's no compulsion in religion, those are falsified by the Sharia, which says it is unbelief, it is kufr for a Muslim to hold that the remnant cults bearing the names Christianity or Judaism are acceptable. And this is a matter over which there is no disagreement among Islamic scholars. And if they are uncertain, if they have a question about it, right, the only reason can be that no one has yet offered them a translation of a scholarly Quranic exegesis, a tafsir, which tells us the authority of the tafsir here to explain the accord between the various Quranic verses and their agreement with the Sunnah. Shall I pause there? Do you want to say anything, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I think that that last point is especially key here, that the reason that people have this erroneous opinion, in the opinion of the Sharia law here, is that they haven't been offered an authoritative commentary on the Quran. It's not that they haven't read the Quran, because, you know, you're always hearing Muslims say, well, what does the Quran say? Well, what the Quran says doesn't really matter. In Islam, the scholar's interpretation of the Quran is more authoritative than the words of the Quran.
Right, correct. So let's continue. It says here, Islam is the final religion that Allah Most High will never abrogate. So Christianity and Judaism have been abrogated. Islam has replaced that. It is the true replacement theology. Let us continue. This is the orthodox position on Muhammad within Islam from the Sharia. I have been favored above the prophets in 6 things. I've been endowed with consummate succinctness of speech, says Muhammad. And because it's a religion of warm peace, I have been made triumphant through dread, through fear. And war booty has been made lawful for me, which is plunder. The whole earth has been made a purified place of worship for me. My question is, does this mean that the whole earth has been made a purified place of worship of Muhammad or for Muhammad? Because this is a little ambiguous. I think that's that ambiguous. And notice, I have been sent to all created beings. So Muhammad has been sent to all, and the succession of the prophets has been completed in me. He replaces all of the previous prophets. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Yeah, that's a really interesting phrase, as you pointed out, that the whole earth has been made a purified place of worship for me. Now, of course, if we're reading this literally, the historical Muhammad didn't travel very far. So why would the whole earth be made a place of worship for him, unless it's somehow saying that any Muslim worshiping anywhere is somehow worshiping on behalf of Muhammad, or is worshiping through Muhammad, or something like that.
Well, he does say in one of the hadith of Bukhari, and he also does say in Sirah, before he attacks the Jews and drives them out of Arabia, he says, the earth belongs to Allah and his apostle. So think, the earth belongs to Allah and his apostle, so the earth belongs to Muhammad.
Yeah, we get these kind of statements all the time in Islamic sources, and, you know, Muslims are like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. We just worship Allah only. That's why we say we believe in one God and his messenger. We don't, and not the other 10,000 messengers that came
But
before him or
Allah,
whatever.
if you look at the primary Islamic text, the Sunnah, which is the Hadith, the Sharia, and the Quran, Muhammad makes up what, 90% of those texts. Allah is maybe 10%. If you look at the rest of the Islamic text, most of it, 99% of it, is all about Muhammad. If you remove Allah from Islam, you still have Islam. But if you remove Muhammad, you have maybe 8% left.
Yeah, definitely. Western scholars used to call Muslims Mohammedans. And I think that term is actually, while
Correct.
Muslims consider it offensive, I think it is more accurate because Muhammad is clearly the central figure of the religion. Muslims don't believe in all the prophets like they claim. They believe what Muhammad said about the prophets. They don't really believe in God. They believe in what Muhammad said about God, that kind of thing.
Correct. Yeah, let's continue then. So now I need to stress the validity of this book. I'm going to go through I'm going to use Islam QA as my reference. Now, Islam QA receives between 2 years ago when I checked their stats, right? They were getting about 330 million hits a day, and they get now about 400 million hits a day. So in theory, per month. So in theory, they get 1/4 of the world's Muslims visit their site for advice. They're the biggest Islamic advice site in the world. Let's look at what Islam Q has to say about this book. The Reliance of the Traveler presents the established and approved views of the Shafi school of fiqh, right? Shafi school of jurisprudence. The translation is excellent. The translator has added several appendices which enhance the value of the book. The book is an orthodox presentation of Shafi fiqh. Let's have a look here. The Reliance of the Traveler is really hard. It is hard to praise this book enough. It stands without equal or competitor as the primary Sunni manual of Islam in English. There is no other book that comes close, bar none. This is true not only because of the relevance of its content, but also because of its rigor. Okay, let's look at a final one here. The book, The Reliance of the Traveler, is it a good resource? The book you refer to is an English translation of a highly reputable classical manual on Shafi'i fiqh. The English translation has been authenticated by Al-Azhar University. This is the oldest, most authentic, most prominent Islamic university in the world, right? This is where they train imams. And also this is where Barack Obama, when the first time he went to speak to the Islamic world, he spoke at Al-Azhar, right? The significance of that place should then be clear from that. And also other ulama, so various other organizations, massively important Islamic organizations have also accredited this book. Their seals are in the book. So now let's speak of captives of war. So when you've been invaded by an Islamic army, and don't forget that 70% of what was then Christendom has now been swallowed up under Islam. Europe is what is left of what was once, it is 25% perhaps of what was once the entire North Africa, Eastern Turkey, as well as a lot of Asia. This was, and also Arabia. Those were Jewish and Christian, but predominantly Christian. Thousands of churches are now gone. So captives of war in Islam may be killed, and let us see. You'll see why we say this. Section 0914, Section O is justice in this book. When an adult male is taken captive, the caliph considers the interests of Islam and the Muslims and decides between the prisoner's death, slavery, release without paying anything, or ransoming the prisoner in exchange for money or for a Muslim captive. So he can decide between the prisoner's death or slavery. If the prisoner becomes a Muslim before the caliph chooses any of the four alternatives, then he may not be killed. So Islam is what will save you from death. You can still be made a slave though, in this case. It is permissible in jihad to cut down the enemy's trees and destroy their dwellings. Just thought I would throw that in. Now, don't forget, enslaving or killing prisoners are war crimes and crimes against humanity in Western law. Your thoughts on this in the previous section I mentioned in Reliance?
Yeah, well, first on Reliance, I think it's important to point out yet again that, you know, we aren't saying this stuff. This is Islam's most trusted and authentic sources. We're not just making stuff up here. We're going to the sources, and, you know, these sources have way more authority than some random commenter on YouTube. And then in regards to the options for a prisoner, I think the most interesting thing here is that the caliph gets to decide which one, not based on some kind of moral judgment, but based on what is most beneficial to him and the Muslim people.
Yeah, exactly. And for their financial benefit as well. So now let's talk about a caliph. Let's define a few terms. Let's talk about a caliph. So the caliph's duties and how to become a caliph. Well, let's see his duties. The Khalifa of the Muslim Ummah or community must strive to, 1, safeguard Islam in its original form and to protect against the introduction of new things. This is again taken from an Islamic document. Okay, and the introduction of new things, or bid'ah, into Islam. He must establish justice, including punishments for crimes among the people. He must ensure the protection of the Ummah. He must protect the physical boundaries of the state. He must defend the rights of Muslims abroad. And he must see to it that Islam can spread freely in non-Muslim lands, including the use of force. Right? And I can bring up other references to that, but then would be a whole night. So, and he must also organize jihad against any non-Muslim government which prevents the Muslim dawah from entering its land. If Muslims are prevented from spreading Islam, building mosques, pushing their ideology, they have to fight that government. They have to fight those people. Any comments?
Yeah, we often hear that jihad is only allowed to be defensive in Islam, and this might be a good example of the kind of lies they tell, that, you know, they might technically be true because they consider it defensive to take over a non-Muslim country because those people are being aggressors against Allah. So that, you know, they can say that with a straight face because of a technicality in the way they've changed definitions.
Yeah. Now also I can bring up, if necessary, I can do it next time, an actual fatwa, again, from Islam QA, explicitly discussing this, explicitly stating that this is the case. Now, interestingly, the man who wrote this article, right, is Gharm Allah Al-Ghamdi, who is a member of the Muslim Student Association, which is an arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And he gave this talk at the University of Southern California. This is not some crazy guy in Saudi Arabia. This is a man at UCLA. So ponder that. So let us have a look from this paper, from this discussion on the Khalifa. One way the caliph may be chosen is through the use of force. He can kill his way to the top, in other words, right? So Ibn Hanbal, and this is the man who started the Hanbali school of fiqh, well, he says that if a caliph has seized power, it is forbidden to fight him, right? And if a person has already seized power, not voted, seized power, to avoid bloodshed, that person should be accepted. Shafi believed that a person who seizes power is a legitimate khalifa. Now ask yourself, why are there so many coup d'etats, violent coup d'etats in the Middle East? Nawawi believed that, yeah?
I was just going to say, I think that the gist here is that in Islam, might makes right. So if you are the strongest person and you take over, well, that was Allah's will because Allah values that kind of thing.
Right. Now, if someone forces himself on the ummah, but he is qualified, then he should be accepted. And Ibn Khaldun, right, this is the most famous Islamic historian, an incredibly famous man, even in the West, for having written the very first history of the world and for creating the field of sociology, says that forceful seizure of power by someone is legitimate as long as he follows Islam. And Ibn Taymiyyah, that famous guy, says after someone has seized power, he is legitimate. Notice they're not speaking about peaceful succession. They're talking about someone who has literally killed his political opponents. Right. So now on to jizya. So in this episode, we will lay the foundation that we need to understand the rest of what happens within Islam and when they want to establish the caliphate. So jizya is known as a capitation tax. A capitation tax is known as a head tax A head tax is known as a poll tax. It's a flat tax charged on everyone regardless. And of course, if you don't pay it, it literally does become a decapitation tax. So it's a direct uniform tax imposed upon each head or person. It's called a poll tax, right? And this is taken from Merriam-Webster. So let's have a look at Jizya in the Quran 9:29. So this is the tafsir of Ibn Abbas. And he simply says, fight against those who have been given the scripture, the Jews and the Christians. So fight against the Jews and the Christians, and who forbid not that which Allah hath forbidden by his messenger, and they follow not the religion of truth, which is the Din al-Haq, which is Islam. And they do not submit themselves to Allah through confession of the Tawhid, which is, as you know, there is no God but Muhammad, and Allah is his puppet, until they pay the tribute readily, standing from hand to hand, being brought low, abased. And he states, this is his tafsir of that verse, and he simply repeats it, saying, well, it says what it says. Now, let's have a look in the Hidayah, the Hanafi Sharia manual. This is the primary manual of the Hanafi school. The Prophet has declared that capitation tax is not incumbent upon Muslims, and secondly, capitation tax is a species of punishment. It is inflicted upon infidels on account of their infidelity, whence it is termed jizyat, which is derived from jizya, meaning retribution. Now, 2 days ago, someone told me that this book is filled with fake, fabricated laws. This book has been used for hundreds, about 800 years. And we found out 2 days ago that it is filled with fake law. Now, for the guy that told us this, thank you. I suggest you don't tell us. We don't believe this anyway. Please let the heads of your schools of jurisprudence know that you know better. And he says it, besides, it's only used in India. Well, there are 207 million Muslims in India who use this. So it's okay if 207 million Muslims want to go on the rampage. I guess that's fine. Your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I mean, there's just two of us, but somehow telling us that this is a bad book and we shouldn't read it, which, you know, we're definitely not going to follow it. So don't worry, we agree. It teaches some bad things, but, you know, there's millions of Muslims using this. So why are you telling us? Why are you not telling them?
Yeah. Now, this translation dates to 1791. Right, so this book goes way back, and I mean, it's still in use today. It's still available. If you read the reviews of it on Islamic book sites, you will find this is the primary, most amazing manual, and so on. And this very much, now this book has 2,652 pages, if I recall. It's 4 volumes. It is very, very detailed. We're going to learn about that as we go through the series. So you can learn a great deal. So if the Quran has this verse, they describe what this verse says in about 70 pages. So they provide 70 pages of lawful commentary on this. Now, obviously, Muslims will say it is fake. That they have to try and discredit the information. We did ask him, please give us an authentic book that you do recommend that we can read that will give us the correct information. We're still waiting. And in fact, we are always going to be waiting. Let's have a look at what a base means. So behave in a way that belittles or degrades someone. So in other words, Christians and Jews have to be belittled and degraded by the Muslims. That is what this is intended to do. We must be humiliated, belittled, demeaned, degraded, and disgraced. We have to be punished for refusing to accept Allah.
Yeah,
so,
and this is what counts as being merciful in Islam, that Christians are given this opportunity to feel themselves humiliated and not just instantly put to death.
Yeah, true. We have to be grateful for this opportunity to enrich the Muslims at our expense. So let's have a look at the Umdat al-Salik. This is chapter 011, non-Muslim subjects of the Islamic State. Interestingly, there's a terrorist group called the Islamic State, but they're not Muslims, although they're 100% authentic, follow Sunni Islam. So anyway, so a formal agreement or a contract, actually a written contract of protection. This is like the mafia makes a contract of protection with people in its territory. And if you don't pay it, you're no longer protected by the mafia, because then the mafia will attack you. And it is made of citizens who are Jews and Christians. There are other groups as well, but we'll restrict ourselves. Now notice that as for the pseudo-scriptures or cults that have appeared since Islam, such as the Sikhs, the Mormons, and so on, the Baha'is, they neither are nor could be a book, since the Quran is the final revelation. So they believe they cancel out any and all religions on earth, every single one. Such an agreement is only valid if the people follow the rules of Islam and those involving public behavior and dress. They will tell you how to behave, what to do, where to do it, when to do it, and also how you're allowed to dress. And also you have to pay the non-Muslim poll tax, the Jizya. So the Sharia tells us, and the fiqh tells us, that it is entirely in accordance with verse 929 of the Quran. And the non-Muslim poll tax is collected with leniency and politeness. This is commonly known in science as a lie. And this was written by the translator, Nuh Keller, who is a Sufi, by the way. In fact, most of the people who translate these books are Sufis, which is a very interesting point. And he has lied about this. And we will cover this in other books, and we will see how he has deliberately altered the text. In many, many cases, we have to be very careful. The English translations are altered. Now, such non-Muslim subjects are obliged to comply with Islamic rules. They are distinguished from Muslims in dress. In other words, they have to wear something that distinguishes them. They must wear zunnah, a wide cloth belt. They are not greeted with peace be upon you, assalamu alaikum. They must keep to the side of the street. What they don't say here is they must keep to the worst part of the street, the one with the potholes, the one with the rocks, the uneven part. They may not build higher than or as high as the Muslims' buildings, though if they acquire a tall house, it is not destroyed. They are forbidden to openly display wine or pork or to ring church bells. Why do we allow them to have a very, very loud azan in the morning and the evening and the afternoon? They may not display crosses. They may not recite the Torah or the gospel aloud. They may not make public displays of their funerals and feast days, and they are forbidden to build new churches.
And this is how non-Muslims live at peace with Islam. They make themselves inferior in every possible way. They pay money. They don't do anything to propagate their religion. And then I should also point out that really this only applies for Christians and Jews, and in some opinions, other ancient religions like Zoroastrianism, that for, anyone else, atheists or Hindus aren't considered a valid religion at all, or, Mormons or practitioners of New Age religions or whatever, they don't even have this option. They are simply convert or be killed. Those are their only two options.
Yeah, sure. And in fact, in many cases, you're not allowed to convert because then they will lose their cash cow because you are to pay them half your income each year. So let's have a look further. If the subjects of the Islamic State refuse to conform to the rules of Islam or to pay the poll tax, their agreement with the state has been violated. And when a subject's agreement with the state has been violated, the caliph chooses between the four alternatives mentioned above in connection with prisoners of war. And the first of those is your death. The second one is slavery. These are your choices. Conform, die, or be enslaved. This is the peace of Islam. Now, let's have a look at the Encyclopedia of Islam. This is an older version. This is version 2, I think. But this is the biggest Islamic academic work in the world. It is maintained by Muslims too, believe it or not. And it is multiple volumes. It's something like 13 volumes. To buy a copy will cost you $36,000. And then you still have to pay over $1,000 a year for maintenance. And if you rent it, it will cost you $4,000 a month.
What a bargain.
Okay. Yeah, it's if you guys want to fund us, we'd love to get a copy of this. So dhimma is the term used to designate the sort of indefinitely renewed contract to which the Muslim community accords hospitality, isn't that a lovely word, and protection from them to members of other revealed religions on condition of their acknowledging the domination of Islam. So remember, fight those who do not believe in Allah until they pay the tribute out of the hand and are utterly subdued. you need to be utterly subdued. You have to admit that Islam and Muslims are dominant over you. So Muhammad first tried to integrate the Jewish groups at Medina, and then he opposed them violently. So the essential Quranic text is, now notice here, they've mentioned here 924. Interestingly, they're referring to verse 929. So this is off by 5 verses, which means that they are referring to a Quran that was different 100 years ago. So that tells us the Quran was different. This is the primary Islamic scholarly work in the world. So fight those who do not believe until they pay the jizya, which would imply that after they have come to pay, there was no longer reason for fighting them. And they mention the jizya. Now notice the spelling, D-J-I-Z-Y. Sometimes it's hard to find information in their books because there are so many different spellings, multiple spellings. And of course, you pay this money to a paramount power, someone who's politically above you. So Islam is a political system, and the dues are demanded from Jews and Christians for the non-adoption of Islam. So for the fact that you don't, you pay this. Now, that's one definition from a scholarly work, and as we continue, we will find out what the actual Islamic books say. Now, Islam is always casting the first stone. So just next to that, after that chapter, we have this, the penalty for fornication or sodomy. And they refer to the legal penalty is imposed upon anyone who fornicates or commits sodomy. If they've reached puberty, they're sane, they commit that voluntarily, no matter whether they are a Muslim or a dhimmi, a non-Muslim subject of the Islamic State, or an apostate. So the law applies even to apostates. And it says here, he or she is stoned to death, defined in section 012.6. And the penalty consists of being whipped or beaten 100 stripes. And this people die from. And then, of course, the mercy of Islam, a pregnant woman is not stoned until she gives birth and the child can suffice with the milk of another. Yes. Yes. This is, what did Jesus say? That he who is without sin cast the first stone?
And in Islam, it's he with the most sin, i.e. Muhammad, cast the stone.
Yeah, make the child an orphan and kill the mother. I think that's very simple. I would like some Muslim to show me, well, no, actually we have this Sharia manual which says exactly the opposite, but sure. So let's have a look. Is jizya collected with dignity? The honor of Islam lies in insulting kufr and kafirs. One who respects the kafirs dishonors the Muslims. The real purpose of levying jizya on them is to humiliate them to such an extent that they may not be able to dress well and to live in grandeur. They should constantly remain terrified and trembling. It is intended to hold them under contempt and to uphold the honor and the might. This will be the political and military might of Islam. This was written by Sufi Saint Ahmad Sirhindi, and he lived from 1564 to 1624, and this is letter number 163. And dhimmi is derived from the Arabic root that means guilt or blame. And notice a hypocrite, now they speak of Muslims here, a hypocrite is considered to be a Muslim in name only. And this is very similar to what a dhimmi is. There's an unwillingness. Now, when they mean here, that is, we are unwilling to wage war, nor are we willing to fund holy war. So that is why you are forced to pay the jizya. You are unwilling to become a Muslim and fight on their behalf to expand the caliphate. And you're not willing to provide money. So they will take money from you to expand the war effort. And the Quran says that true believers fight and are ruthless to unbelievers. Now, it is an order for Muslims. Now, this is the 9th century, and you've got Tirmidhi, who says, in normal conditions, when Muslims are in power and they are not living as a minority, they are not under any compulsion or subjugation. It is an order for Muslims that they should not give leeway to non-Muslims, and they should not greet them first, nor yield the way for them. In other words, when Muslims are in power, they're not to show any kindness or pity to non-Muslims.
That first sentence you read there just blows the mind, that the honor of Islam lies in insulting the kufr and kafir. You know, you'd think that you'd get honor from your prayers or your worship or maybe your good deeds, your charity, something like that. But no, you get honor from insulting non-Muslims. It just blows the mind.
Yeah, incredible, incredible. Yeah, this is simply how it is. Are there any questions in the comments that we can have a look at in the meantime?
There's been some chatter in the chat, but I haven't really seen anything
Okay, that's fine.
or anything question-wise. I mean,
Just wanted to give them a chance. So now have a look. Let's look at Al-Ghazali. This is the man that is probably the primary scholar of Islam after Muhammad. And he says one must go on jihad at least once a year. And then he speaks on, okay, this is advising on vanquished non-Muslim Dhimmi peoples. You may use a catapult against them when they are in a fortress, even if among them are women and children. You may kill the women and children. One may set fire to them or drown them. If a person of the people of the book, Jews and Christians, are enslaved, his marriage is automatically annulled. And you may cut down their trees, and you must destroy their useless books. Jihadists may take as booty or plunder whatever they decide, and they may steal as much food as they need. They are not permitted to display their wine or church bells. Their houses may not be higher than the Muslims, no matter how low the Muslims' houses are. The Dhimmi may not ride an elegant horse or a mule. He may ride a donkey, only if the saddle is made of wood. He may not walk on the good part of the road. Dhimmis must wear an identifying patch. Even women and Dhimmis must hold their tongue.
just another example of how Islam is all about appearances, that non-Muslims have to be visibly inferior. It's not good enough that they supposedly follow a false religion and thus supposedly would be automatically inferior. They have to be visibly inferior. They can't build tall houses even. It's just crazy stuff.
Yeah. So it is about subjugation. We have to be subjugated. And when we get to the Hidayah and we start to read the pages of the Hidayah describing this, you'll see how disgusting, how ugly it actually is. So Al-Ghazali, let's have a look at what he has to say. Each male Jew should wear a yellow badge on his headgear and a piece of lead hanging around his neck inscribed with the word Dhimmi to signify they had to pay a poll tax. Jews had to wear girdles around their waists. Abu Shuja further imposed two signs on Jewish women, that to wear a black shoe and a red shoe, and a small brass bell on her neck or shoe to announce the separation of Jewish women from Muslim women. He assigned cruel Muslim men to spy upon Jewish women, to oppress them with curses, humiliation, and spite. The Muslim population mocked the Jews, and the mob and their children beat up the Jews in Baghdad. The Dhimmi is obliged not to mention Allah or his apostle. Now we are speaking about this, and that's why we get the most horrendous comments in, on YouTube and on Facebook and so on, because we are not supposed to be speaking about this. We're not entitled to. And they have to rebuke us and oppose us. So Jews and Christians must pay the jizya, and the Dhimmi must hang his head while the official takes hold of his beard and hits the Dhimmi on the mandible. And that's Al-Ghazali, written in 1101.
More amazing tolerance here. I just can't imagine why Christians aren't lining up to convert to Islam. I mean, there's just so much love in Islam.
Yeah, I know. It's, as I said, the religion of warm peace. So let's have a look at a book called The Origins of the Islamic State. It's Kitab Futuh al-Buldan, how you say that. This is volume 1 of a history of Islam, being a translation from the Arabic, right, by an Islamic scholar. And let's have a look. The Origins of the Islamic State, page 354. You have to sell your children and wives in order to pay the poll tax. This is the practice as it was in the day, and the Sharia does not and cannot change. It is the law of Allah. It's also the Sunnah of Muhammad. So they made people sell their wives and children to pay the tax. They enslaved the wives and children and sold them. So let's have a look. Its people came to terms stipulating that their lives, their property, and their children be safe, and they agreed to pay the poll tax. And they capitulated, they gave up, they gave in, agreeing to pay the poll tax to spare their wives and children. And think of those who couldn't do that, didn't have the money. This is the law of Islam. And once they gain authority, once they gain power, once the Sharia gets in force, this is what they will do again. That's what they intend to do again.
We have an interesting comment.
Yeah.
Michael pointed out that what you were reading on the previous slide with the Jews having to wear bells on their shoes and whatnot is just like what happened in Nazi Germany, where the Jews were forced to wear stars to identify themselves.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go to bing.com. Let me just do this very quickly. And I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to type Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Okay, so this is, I'm going to Bing search engine. I'm going to an image search. This is an image search of,
You need to
this should
switch
come up in a
screens.
moment.
Oh, never mind. There it is.
This is an image search on Bing. And all I typed in was Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And you'll see here, this is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem having a little discussion with Hitler. This is him with these troops. These are SS Death's Head troops that he raised to fight in Europe. He raised something like 2 million troops to fight against the Allies in North Africa. But he also formed the largest SS division in Europe, 30,000 men who fought as Nazis. He was promoted to the rank of Nazi general. He volunteered for the Nazi army. This man is the grandfather of Yasser Arafat, who headed up the PLO. You'll know him from there. This is him with Hitler. This is him with Hitler. This is him with Himmler, who was the number 2 in charge of the Nazis. That's him with Hitler. This is him giving the Nazi salute, Nazi salute, Nazi salute. So yeah, this is, and here's the modern Grand Mufti of Jerusalem with the Pope. Good grief. Is the Pope a Catholic? That's a good question these days. This is him with, so yeah, this man provided Hitler with many of the ideas that he implemented against the Jews. So yes, there's a lot of truth to that. So yeah, Hitler derived a lot of those ideas from the Grand Mufti, who lived in Berlin, and they were friends for 3 years. Let's look at the term mafia, right? Because we're talking about extortion with violence. So Sicily was once an Islamic emirate, right? And mafia may have come to Sicilian through Arabic, right? Mafi means exempted in Islamic law, right? And jizya is the yearly tax imposed on non-Muslims residing in Muslim lands, and the people who pay it are exempted from prosecution. So the term mafia derives from the Arabic word mafi. You're exempted if you pay. Now, let's have a look at just some of what Islamic scholars say about Judaism and Christianity, about warfare. So this is from a series called The Life of Muhammad by this guy down here. I won't even try to say his name. Teachings of Judaism and Christianity about war. Now, Islam is a religion of war. And they are trying to turn Christianity into a religion of violence and pretend that they are a religion of peace. Now, it says here, the teachings of Moses, right, is far from our conception of justice and fair play. It is not possible to act upon that teaching today, and the teaching of Jesus is impracticable and has always been so. Never in their history have Christians tried to put the teaching of Jesus into practice. Only the teaching of Islam is practicable, one which has been both preached and practiced by its exponents, and the practice of which can create and maintain peace in the world. And if you want to be caliph, just murder the guy who's currently caliph. Yeah. Your thoughts there?
Yeah. You know, he's saying that Moses and especially Jesus, you know, their teachings are impractical. You don't want to follow them. You want to follow Muhammad. He's the one that teaches us the true practical faith of waging war to get what you want.
Correct. And they go on to say, and this is what they teach Muslims, this is a modern seerah. The practical verdict of the Christian peoples is that war is the real teaching of the New Testament, and that turning the other cheek was an opportunist teaching dictated by the helplessness of early Christians.
What nonsense. I'm sorry, but it's just so ridiculous. As if Jesus didn't know that people were against him when he taught that. I mean, come on.
I know. And don't forget, Muhammad was helpless. In his first 13 years, he gained, what, 100, 150 converts because he had no political power. He then became a political leader, raised money, raised an army, became a military leader, and then became incredibly wealthy and powerful, right? Because he spread Islam through the sword. Now, basically, they're projecting their own development onto Christianity and trying to paint Christians. I mean, Jesus never had an army. Jesus never killed anyone. Muhammad killed people. Every single one of his followers was a murderer, was a general, was someone who fought and killed and raped and tortured and enslaved. All of them owned slaves. None of that is true with any of the followers of Jesus. Jesus had 12 apostles, and just by sheer coincidence, Muhammad also had 12 companions. So this is, I mean, this is what they're teaching Muslims, and Muslims are taught to believe this. They've never read the Bible. They've been told what it says by their lying scholars.
Yeah, and I would like to know who these Christian people who are that claim that the New Testament teaches war. I've never met any such Christian in my life.
Yeah, they'll say, well, let's have a look at what they say and how they try to make this. Islam does not teach aggression as did Moses, nor does it, like present day and presumably corrupt Christianity, preach a contradiction. It does not ask us to turn the other cheek and at the same time sell our clothes to buy a sword. Islam forbids aggression, but it urges us to fight if the failure to fight jeopardizes peace and promotes war. If failure to fight means the exploitation of free belief in the search of truth, it is our duty to fight. This is just propaganda. But notice, the only evidence for the supposed violence within Christianity is that Jesus says, sell your clothes, buy a sword. Let's have a look at what Islam teaches. We'll do one or two more slides, Thaddeus, I think, and then try and keep it to roughly the hour. Let us look in the Reliance of the Traveler at the section 09.8. Actually, hold on, just pause. So your thoughts on this, I mean, as a Christian, your thoughts here and and how they are corrupting this and lying about. How do we refute this as good Christians who want to refute this when Muslims come to us with this that's been drilled into their head?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a couple of strategies. One, you could overwhelm them with the abundant number of passages in the New Testament and the words of Jesus that teach the opposite. You could try to look at that particular passage about buying a sword and see what it means in context. Or, you can just say, use the Islamic strategy of how they answer every question and say, you're not a scholar. Show me a Christian scholar who agrees with this.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Show us any scholars. We are reading from their scholars. So let's have a look what the finest Islamic law, the finest scholars of Islam, the absolute best, the pinnacle of their study and research and their legal rulings. Let's see. The objectives of jihad. This is not the definition of jihad, that comes earlier, but I'm just going to the objectives of jihad in section 09.8. The caliph makes war upon Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians, provided he has first invited them to enter Islam in faith and practice, and if they will not, then invited them to enter the social order of Islam by paying the jizya. And this is the significance of their paying it. It is not the money, right? So they must enter the social order as subjects of Islam. And they remain in their ancestral religions, and the war continues until they become Muslim, or else they pay the non-Muslim poll tax in accordance with the word of Allah. Fight those who do not believe in Allah until they pay the poll tax out of hand and are humbled. Quran 9:29. This is the definition of this is the reason of jihad. Now, as we go through this presentation later on, we will learn that they actually don't have to call you. They can just attack you. They have an out for this as well. Right, so let's do a couple more slides. Let's finish this. So let's have a look at this. Says the chapters on military expeditions, and you'll notice that the discussion on dhimmis falls under the chapters on military expeditions, right? And it says they should not give such leeway to non-Muslims. They should not greet them first, nor yield the way for them. In other words, you have to get out of their way, right? Some of the people of knowledge, that this is the alim, their scholars, said that it only means that it is disliked by us because it would amount to honoring them if they had to get out of the way for us. And the Muslims were only to humiliate the dhimmis. For this reason, when one of them is met on the path, a Muslim is not to yield for him, because doing so would amount to honoring a Christian or a Jew. We are not to be honored. So where Muslims are living as a minority, they're allowed to give such leeway to non-Muslim rulers for the greater interest of the Muslim community. So while a minority, be nice. When you're no longer a minority, humiliate the Christians and the Jews. And it also says here, this goes on, if they refuse, then take the jizya from them. If they refuse to become Muslims, and if they refuse to pay the jizya, then fight them. Your thoughts?
We have a good comment here from Esther Michael. She says, just preach about your religion. Must you talk about Christians and call that teaching? And I think that this brings out a good point, that Muslims always are trying to talk about Christianity. It's very hard to get them to talk about Islam. But if Islam is supposedly this great and awesome religion, why do you need to try to attack Christianity? Why can't you just show us how great Islam is?
Yeah, well, it tells you that they are anti-Christian, they're anti-biblical, they're anti-Christian very much. But yeah, also Muslims are not allowed, they're forbidden to talk about the Sharia, and they're forbidden to talk about the fiqh to non-Muslims. Most of them don't know it, for that matter they don't. There's ignorance there, but also they're not taught it. However, they're not allowed to, so they can only talk about what they're allowed to talk about. And this is something, these books, they're not allowed to discuss. This is because
even if they were allowed, they wouldn't want to. I mean, let's be honest here. This isn't going to be winning any converts with this kind of teaching.
Stardust says here, if you study the Muslim religion and the Catholic religion, there's no difference. Stardust, I'm going to say that you're very, very stupid. Okay? And if you continue in that vein, I am really going to take offense, and I'm going to go at you with, and I'm going to expose you as a complete ignoramus. So I'm not Catholic. I was raised as a Protestant. I was raised as an Anglican. My uncle is a bishop in the Anglican Church. I have 2 other priests in the Anglican Church in my family, but I'm afraid you're very, very mistaken. Certainly there are issues, but there are issues in the Anglican Church as well. There are some severe issues in the Anglican Church, and there's some severe issues in the Catholic Church in Rome, certainly. But no, if you want to debate Islam with me and then discuss how these are the same, I'm sorry, no. Yeah, moving on. Now, we have here the history of Al-Tabari, okay? Now, you and he have written between you a document. Now, Al-Tabari is probably regarded as the best writer of tafsir, as well as he wrote an entire history, I think 40 volumes on Islamic history. So he's highly regarded. And now you and he have written between you a document. Allah has put an end to discussion and truces between the Muslims. So there are no truces, and the people of war. So they speak of the Muslims, and the rest of people are known as the people of war. That is us. Since the revelation of quittance, and this is Quran 9, Surah 9. And except for those who agreed to pay the jizya, so only those who have been invaded and subjected to pay the jizya by force are given peace. Otherwise, they must make war on everyone else. So what are your thoughts? If Stardust, if you can find me where this is written in the Bible, in the doctrine of the Catholic Church, I'd love to see it. Please let us know where the Sharia and the fiqh of the Catholic Church is, who the authors are, name the books. Looking forward to it. Love to see it. Sorry about that, but your thoughts, Thaddeus?
Yeah, sorry, I got a little distracted by Stardust as well. But yeah, going back to the subject at hand, that somehow the jizya is the mercy of Islam, and that's like the craziest thing. It's like, this is as merciful as it gets in Islam, is you get to pay a tax instead of being put to death. Hooray. And if you don't have enough money to pay that tax, the mercy continues. You get to sell your children into slavery to pay it. Not you get excused for it, but you get the privilege of selling your children into slavery to pay the tax.
Yeah, you do. So now notice these scholars are interpreting these Quranic verses that we get told that they lie about. I mean, if there are other scholarly books, and if there are, which are classical, famous scholarly books and authoritative, please provide them. We'd be happy to read them. If you have other books of fiqh written by the major schools that have binding fatwas, because there's the phenomenon of non-binding fatwas that no one has to particularly listen to. But the Sharia and the fiqh are the binding fatwas of Islam. And we'd like to see those books. Bring us the best, and we'll see if they say anything different than this. So yeah, it's 9 o'clock now on this side. Shall we continue, or shall we?
I think this is probably a good place to leave it for today. we'll take some comments from the and questions from the audience.
One
if we
last
have any.
item. They mentioned that quittance, the Surah At-Tawbah, or quittance, or bara, right, which is Surah 9, is also called the Surah At-Tawbah, in which the jizya, in Muslim law, poll tax to be paid by non-Muslims in exchange for protection, is also a sign of inferiority. Just so that I'll end off at that point. So it is meant to be, and that's Tabari, volume 17, page 101.
Yeah, I think that this is a good introduction to the subject of subjugation. We're only scratching the surface here, but we don't want to go too long in one day. So this is a good place to stop it. And then we'll pick up next time where we left off.
Yeah, so we can do this in 1 week and continue this. So yeah, we didn't want to, we've done the show before on Thaddeus's channel, but we wanted to give an easy introduction so that we don't dump too much information. I hope this was useful. I hope this is stuff you can use in your discussions, and ask Muslims to provide you with authoritative references. We're still waiting.
Yeah, I think that if you don't get any other takeaway from this series, I mean, hopefully you get a lot out of it, but if you don't get anything else out of this series, I think the important thing to do is when you're talking to Muslims is demand sources, because they will lie through their teeth, and they may not even know that it's lies. They might be repeating someone else's lies that they've heard. So ask them for sources. Say, I can wait. You come back in another week when you've talked to your imam and you have some scholarly information for me, because I need sources. I can't just take your word for it. You wouldn't take my word for it, so why should I take yours for it?
Yeah. Also, Thea's just mentioned a comment. It is confusing that Muslims also believe in Jesus, while Isa, Jesus in the Quran, is a different false Jesus. Actually, there are technically 3 Jesus figures in Islam. The first is the Jesus of the Bible. If we have to go to different scholarly works to discuss that, Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim, Ibn Taymiyyah more so than him. Jesus of the Bible is a fabrication by the Christians, and Jesus was designed as, he's the Antichrist. So the Christian Jesus of the Bible is the Antichrist. He is an insult, designed as an insult to God. This is someone who is weak, who was beaten, bloodied, humiliated, and this is our way of insulting the prophet Jesus. And of course, then you have Isa, who is actually Esau, that translates as Esau, not Yesu. And he is the Gnostic Jesus, because Muhammad was exposed mostly to Jews and the Torah. He learned Christianity late in life, and prior to learning proper Christianity and actually getting a proper Bible, he learned Gnostic teachings. So he was introduced to Ebionite as well as Nestorian Gnostics, who taught him their false conception of Jesus. So this was his idea of Jesus. And so there you've got that Jesus. Then you've got, and then he, of course, is, if we go through some other texts later on, he's Muhammad Jesus. He is the real Messiah. He's the King Messiah. And the purpose of Jesus was to foretell the coming of Muhammad.
On a more positive note, I think it's very telling that everyone wants to claim Jesus. That, of course, Muslims want to claim Jesus, that they have the real Jesus. Mormons claim that they know the real Jesus. True. New Age spirituality often claims that Jesus was a mystical prophet of their religion. Sometimes Buddhists say that Jesus was a Buddha, that is an enlightened person, and that's part of their religion. But, Christianity has the real Jesus. We have the historical Jesus. The Gospels are the only legitimate historical sources, other than, some minor mentions that verify the Gospels, non-religious texts. So everyone wants Jesus. Christianity has Jesus. So we're in the right place, I think.
Yeah, So yeah, I hope this was useful to everyone. I hope that you can use this. I apologize I was a little angry earlier. Certainly one can levy criticisms at the rabbinic Jews. You can levy criticism at the Catholic Church. You can do so. But that was a falsehood that was told. And if it wasn't for the Catholic Church, Europe would right now be an Islamic state. If it wasn't for the Crusades, you would now be saying the Shahada and bending over in the mosque if it wasn't for the Catholics. And so, yeah, certainly there are issues, but we have to look at those realistically. And the same lies that I hear told about the Talmud and the Jews, and I've done 6 shows on the Jews in detail. I spent 3.5 months reading the Talmud, which is 3.5 months more than you have. people are telling the same lies about the Catholic Church. Yes, there are issues there, but there are issues in my church too. So, yeah, that's my story. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll leave you the last word for you, Thaddeus.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you found this program very useful. We encourage you to subscribe to Armageddon News if you haven't already done so. We'll be doing more shows on this channel as well as on my channel. We'll keep the shows on this channel related to the themes of the channel. So we'll be talking a lot about subjugation and the caliphate and the political system of Islam here. On my channel, we'll be talking more about moral and historical issues with Islam. And thanks again for joining us. And with that, have a blessed evening or morning or afternoon, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. See ya.
Good night.